Sit closer. I don't bite. Mafia boss pulled the single mom in as she tried to slip away from him. The smell of burnt coffee and stale fryer grease clung to Lena Ward like a second skin. It was 2 a.m, and the fluorescent lights of the diner buzzed with a headache-inducing hum that seemed to vibrate right through the soles of her worn-out sneakers. Lena wiped down the last laminate table, her movements mechanical, born of a bone-deep exhaustion that sleep never quite cured. She pulled her apron off, untying the knot at her waist with fumbling fingers, and reached into the front pocket to retrieve her night's earnings. She laid the crumpled bills and loose coins on the counter, counting them out slowly. $20, $30, $42.50. Lena stared at the small pile of cash, her chest tightening. It was not enough. It was never enough. $42 would barely cover groceries for 3 days, let alone the rent that was already late or the refill for Jamie's asthma medication that cost nearly $100 without insurance. She swept the money into her purse, zipped it shut, and pushed out the heavy glass door into the cool, damp air of Bellevue. The city felt different at this hour. The shadows stretched longer, and the distant wail of sirens was a constant, mournful soundtrack. Lena pulled her thin coat tighter around her body, walking briskly toward the bus stop. She kept her head down, eyes scanning the pavement, a habit she had learned years ago. Invisibility was safety. Her apartment was in Riverside Heights, a neighborhood that had seen better decades, let alone better days. The building smelled of boiled cabbage and damp plaster. Lena climbed the 3 flights of stairs, wincing as the 3rd step groaned under her weight, praying it would not wake the neighbors. Inside, the apartment was silent. A single nightlight glowed in the hallway, casting long shadows against the peeling wallpaper. Lena kicked off her shoes and crept into the bedroom she shared with her 7-year-old son. Jamie was asleep, his small body curled into a tight ball under the quilt. Lena sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress dipping under her weight. She listened. The sound of his breathing was rhythmic but slightly raspy, a sound that made her heart hammer against her ribs. She reached out, brushing a lock of dark hair off his forehead. His skin was cool. "Thank God. I will fix this," she promised silently, the words fierce in her mind. "I will figure it out." The next morning, the reality of her promise crashed into the daylight. Lena stood in the kitchen, pouring cereal into a bowl for Jamie, when she saw the envelope slid under the front door. It was from Mr. Henderson, the landlord. She tore it open, her eyes scanning the typed letters. Due to the upcoming redevelopment projects in the Riverside District and increasing property taxes, rent for all units will increase by 15%, effective the 1st of next month. Lena dropped the paper onto the counter. 15%. It might as well have been $1 million. "Mom?" Jamie asked, looking up from his cereal, milk dripping from his spoon. "You look sad." "I am just tired, baby," Lena said, forcing a bright smile onto her face. "Eat up. You do not want to be late for school." She turned away to hide the tremor in her hands. The diner job and her weekend shifts at the retail store were not going to cut it. She was drowning, and the water was rising fast. Later that afternoon, during a slow lull at the diner, her coworker Sarah leaned against the counter, popping a piece of gum. "You look like you're carrying the world on your shoulders." "Lena," Sarah said. "Rent hike," Lena muttered, scrubbing a stain on the counter that refused to lift. "I need a 3rd job." "Or a miracle?" Sarah lowered her voice, glancing around to make sure the manager was not listening. "You know, my cousin works down at Club Ember in the chaotic downtown district. She says the cocktail waitresses there make $300 a night in tips, sometimes more." Lena paused, the rag stilling in her hand. Club Ember. Everyone in Bellevue knew the name. It was an upscale lounge, darker and more exclusive than the nightclubs that catered to college kids. But there were rumors. Dark rumors. "I heard the owner is dangerous," Lena said, her voice low. "That the place is connected to things I do not want to be around." Sarah shrugged. "Money is money, Lena. Besides, it is just serving drinks. You keep your head down. You smile. You walk away with cash. The owner? You will probably never even see him. He stays in the VIP shadows." Lena looked at the grease stain on the counter. She thought of the letter from the landlord. She thought of Jamie's wheezing breath the night before. She thought of the empty space in her bank account where security should be. She remembered Travis, Jamie's father, and the chaos that followed men who lived outside the law. She had run from that life. She had sworn she would never go back, but fear was a luxury she could not afford. "Do you think your cousin could get me an interview?" Lena asked. 2 days later, Lena stood outside the heavy oak doors of Club Ember. It was only 6 in the evening, but the sky was already darkening. She smoothed the fabric of her black dress, the nicest one she owned, though it was 3 years old and slightly faded at the seams. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. The interior was a shock to the senses. It was cool and smelled of expensive leather, cedar wood, and something spicy and masculine. The lighting was dim, amber sconces casting a warm glow on velvet booths and polished mahogany tables. It was quiet, the club not yet open for the night. A man approached her. He was short, balding, with eyes that moved too fast. This was Marcus, the floor manager. "Lena Ward?" he asked, looking at a clipboard. "Yes," Lena said, keeping her voice steady. Marcus looked her up and down, not in a lewd way, but like he was inspecting a piece of furniture for defects. "You have bar experience?" 5 years. "High volume and fine dining." She lied smoothly about the fine dining part. Marcus grunted. "We do not tolerate drama here. No boyfriends coming in to start fights, no stealing drinks, no skimming tips. The owner is very particular about order. Do you understand?" "I understand," Lena said. "I am here to work. That is all." "Good." A door at the back of the lounge opened, and the atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. It was as if the air pressure dropped. Marcus straightened his spine, his nervous energy spiking. Lena turned to look. A man walked out of the shadows of the hallway. He was tall, wearing a charcoal suit that fit him with tailored perfection. He moved with a silent, predatory grace, his steps making no sound on the thick carpet. His hair was dark, swept back from a face that was arresting in its sharpness, high cheekbones, a strong jaw, and eyes that were the color of cold steel. This was Adrian Cole. Lena felt a chill run down her spine, a primal warning that she was in the presence of something dangerous. She fought the urge to look at her feet. Instead, she forced her chin up, straightening her back. Adrian stopped a few feet away, his gaze landing on Lena. He did not smile. He did not frown. He simply observed her, his eyes sweeping over her face with an intensity that made her feel like he was reading the secrets etched into her bones. "Who is this?" Adrian asked. His voice was deep, smooth, and incredibly calm. "New applicant, Lena Ward," Marcus said quickly. Adrian walked closer, stopping just inside her personal space. He smelled of rain and expensive scotch. "Why do you want to work here?" "Miss Ward?" he asked. Lena met his gaze. Most men made her uncomfortable because they looked at her body. Adrian was looking at her eyes, and that was somehow more unnerving. "I need the money," she said. Adrian tilted his head slightly. "Most girls say they want the atmosphere, or the networking, or the excitement." "I have a son," Lena said, her voice firm. "I have rent to pay. I am not looking for excitement. I am looking for a paycheck." The corner of Adrian's mouth twitched, almost imperceptibly. "Honesty," he said softly. "That is a rare currency in this city." He looked at Marcus. "Give her a trial run tonight. Put her on the main bar." "But sir," Marcus started, "the main bar is for the senior staff." Adrian did not raise his voice. He did not even look at Marcus. He just held Lena's gaze. "Put her on the main bar." "Yes, sir," Marcus whispered. Adrian turned his attention back to Lena. "Do not make me regret it. Lena?" He turned and walked away, vanishing back into the shadows of the hallway. Lena let out a breath she did not realize she had been holding. Her heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She followed Marcus toward the employee lockers, her legs feeling slightly unsteady. As she passed the hallway where Adrian had disappeared, she heard low voices. She slowed her pace involuntarily. 2 large men in dark suits were standing near the exit, their backs to her. "The boss is expecting the shipment at the docks by midnight," one murmured. "Yeah, well, tell the crew to keep it quiet. We do not want any heat on the territory while the new city council is watching," the other replied. Lena kept walking, her blood turning to ice. Shipments, territory. The words confirmed everything she had feared. This was not just a lounge, it was a front. Adrian Cole was not just a businessman, he was a kingpin. She reached the locker room and leaned against the cold metal lockers, closing her eyes. "Run!" a voice in her head screamed. "Run now before you get stuck." Then she thought of the $42 on her kitchen counter. She thought of the eviction notice. She thought of Jamie needing a new winter coat. She opened her eyes and began to unbutton her coat. She would stay. She would work. But she would be a ghost. She would pour drinks, collect her tips, and never, ever let Adrian Cole notice her again. The club opened at 9. By 10, it was packed. The music was a low, thrumming bass that vibrated through the floor. The clientele was different from the diner. These men wore suits that cost more than Lena made in a year. The women wore diamonds that glittered under the amber lights. Lena worked the main bar, her hands moving efficiently. She mixed martinis, poured whiskey, and popped champagne corks with a practiced rhythm. She was good at this. The work kept her mind busy, kept her from looking at the dark booth in the raised VIP section overlooking the floor. She knew he was there. She could feel his presence like a weight in the room. Around midnight, the crowd grew rowdier. A man in a crumpled blue suit leaned over the bar, his face flushed with drink. He slammed his hand down on the counter, slopping gin onto the polished wood. "Hey, sweetheart," he slurred. "You ignored me. I have been waiting 10 minutes. I am sorry, sir," Lena said, her voice polite but tight. "I am making your drink now." He reached out, his hand clumsily trying to grab her wrist. "You have pretty eyes. You want to get out of here later? I have a car outside. A fast one." Lena stepped back smoothly, avoiding his touch without making a scene. "I am working. Sir, here is your gin and tonic. That will be $18. The man scowled, his mood swinging toward aggression. "Do not play hard to get with me. I know what kind of girls work in places like this." Lena froze. Her grip on the bar rag tightened until her knuckles turned white. She wanted to snap at him. She wanted to tell him she was a mother working 2 jobs to keep a roof over her head, but she swallowed her pride. $18. "Please," she repeated. From the corner of her eye, she saw movement. One of the large security guards stepped forward from the wall, his eyes locked on the drunk man. But before the guard could intervene, Lena looked up toward the VIP booth. Adrian was there. He was sitting in the shadows, a tumbler of amber liquid in his hand. He was not looking at the crowd or the dancers or the door. He was looking directly at her. Their eyes met across the smoky, crowded room. The noise of the club seemed to fade. Lena felt exposed, stripped bare by that dark, calculating gaze. He had seen the man harass her. He had seen her step back. He had seen her control her temper. For a second, she thought he would come down. Panic flared in her chest. She did not want to be the damsel in distress. She did not want to owe him anything. But Adrian did not move. He simply lifted his glass slightly in her direction, a tiny, almost invisible gesture of acknowledgement. Then he looked at the security guard and gave a single, sharp nod. The guard moved instantly. He tapped the drunk man on the shoulder and whispered something in his ear. The man's face drained of color. He dropped a $20 bill on the bar and practically ran toward the exit. Lena let out a shaky breath. She looked back at the booth, but Adrian had turned his attention to a man sitting across from him. The connection was broken. The rest of the shift passed in a blur. Lena counted her tips at 3 a.m, $340. In one night. She had made more than she made in a week at the diner. She stared at the cash, feeling a complicated mix of relief and nausea. It was blood money, or at least dirty money, but it spent the same. She took a taxi home, a luxury she never allowed herself, but she was too exhausted to wait for the night bus. When she unlocked her apartment door, the silence welcomed her. She crept into the bedroom and checked on Jamie. He was sprawled out now, one foot sticking out from under the covers. Lena changed into her oversized sleep shirt and washed the smell of expensive cologne and smoke from her hair. She lay down in her bed, staring up at the water stain on the ceiling that looked like a map of a forgotten country. Jamie would ask in the morning. He was smart. He would want to know. "It is just a nicer restaurant," she whispered to the empty room, rehearsing the lie. "The tips are good because the food is expensive." It felt heavy on her tongue. Lying to her son was a line she hated crossing. "I will only do this for a month," she told herself. "Just until I have a buffer. Just until I can find something else." She closed her eyes, but sleep was slow to come. Behind her eyelids, she saw the sharp, angular face of Adrian Cole. She saw the way he had looked at her, not with lust, but with a terrifying curiosity. "I will quit the moment things feel wrong," she whispered. But as she drifted off, the memory of his eyes following her lingered, and she had the sinking feeling that things were already wrong, and that walking away might not be as simple as walking out the door. 2 weeks turned into a month, and the crushing weight on Lena Ward's chest began to lighten, ounce by painful ounce. The rhythm of Club Ember became second nature to her. She learned to navigate the amber-lit maze of the lounge with her eyes closed, balancing trays of crystal glassware while weaving through crowds of men who smelled of expensive cigars and women who smelled of jasmine and ambition. She learned which regulars preferred their scotch neat and which ones wanted their conversations interrupted. She learned that the darker corners of the room were best avoided unless summoned, and that when the music volume dipped slightly, it meant serious business was being conducted in the VIP booths. The money was intoxicating. On a slow Tuesday, Lena brought home $200 in tips. On a Friday, it was closer to $400. For the first time in 3 years, she bought Jamie a pair of sneakers that were not from a discount bin. She paid the electric bill 3 days early. She bought fresh strawberries instead of the frozen kind. But with the relief came a rigid, icy discipline. Lena treated the club like a minefield. She was polite, efficient, and utterly impenetrable. She smiled with her mouth but never her eyes. She deflected personal questions with vague answers and moved away before conversations could take root. She was a ghost in a black dress, haunting the periphery of Adrian Cole's empire without ever really touching it. Adrian noticed. He was a constant, silent presence, watching from the mezzanine or standing in the shadows near the kitchen entrance. He began to test her, subtly at first. One evening, Marcus, the floor manager, called in sick. Adrian approached the main bar where Lena was polishing wine glasses. "I need you to close out the VIP register tonight." "Lena," he said. His voice was low, cutting through the ambient jazz. Lena paused, her cloth stilling on the rim of the glass. That was a manager's job. It involved handling thousands of dollars in cash. "I am not authorized for that. Mr. Cole," she said, keeping her gaze level. "You are now," he replied simply. "Bring the drawer to my office when the floor is clear." An hour later, Lena sat at the heavy mahogany desk in his office, counting stacks of bills. Adrian sat on the leather sofa across the room, reading a file, seemingly ignoring her. Her hands shook slightly, but she forced them to be steady. She counted twice, then she counted a third time. There was a discrepancy. The receipt tape said $5,400. The cash stack was $5,500. An extra $100 bill was stuck to the back of another. It would have been easy to pocket it. It would have been so easy to slip it into her bra and buy Jamie the asthma inhaler refill he would need next week. Adrian was not even looking. Lena took a breath, picked up the extra bill, and clipped it to the top of the stack. She wrote a note on the receipt. Overage of $100 found in drawer count. She stood up and walked to the sofa. "It is done, sir," she said. Adrian looked up. He took the cash box and opened it. His eyes went immediately to the note and the clipped bill. He looked at it for a long moment, then looked up at her. The corner of his mouth lifted, not a smile, but an acknowledgement. "Most people assume I do not count the float before the shift starts," he said quietly. "Most people are foolish," Lena replied. Adrian closed the box. Go home. Lena, you did good work tonight. Lena walked out, her heart thumping. It had been a test. She knew it in her bones, and she had passed. But the tests of character were nothing compared to the tests of safety. The following Thursday was chaotic. A convention was in town, filling the club with businessmen who thought their conference badges gave them license to behave like animals. The air was thick with testosterone and loud laughter. Lena was delivering a round of bourbons to a table near the stage when a hand clamped around her wrist. It was not a playful grab. It was hard, painful, the fingers digging into her tendons. She gasped, nearly dropping the tray. The man attached to the hand was heavy-set. His face flushed a deep, unhealthy red. He grinned, his teeth stained with wine. You have been walking past us all night, sweetheart, he slurred. Why don't you sit down? I want to see if your legs are as soft as they look. Sir, please let go, Lena said, her voice tight. I have other tables to serve. The man yanked her harder, pulling her off balance. She stumbled, her hip hitting the edge of the table. I said, sit down. I pay good money in this dump. I can buy your time. Panic flared in Lena's chest, the old, familiar panic of being overpowered. She tried to twist her arm free, but his grip was like iron. Let go, she snapped, her professional mask slipping. Suddenly, the noise at the table died. The man's friends stopped laughing. They were looking at something behind Lena, their eyes widening in alarm. The grip on Lena's wrist did not loosen, but the air temperature seemed to drop 20 degrees. Let her go. The voice was not loud. It was barely above a whisper, but it carried a weight that made the hair on Lena's arms stand up. Adrian stood directly behind her. He was perfectly still, his hands at his sides, but the violence radiating off him was palpable. His eyes were fixed on the customer's hand where it gripped Lena's skin. The drunk man blinked, trying to focus. Who are you? The manager? Get lost, pal. I am having a conversation. Adrian took one step forward. He did not raise his hand. He did not pull a weapon. He simply leaned in, his face inches from the man's ear. I am the man who decides if you walk out of here or get carried out, Adrian said. His tone was conversational, almost bored, which made it infinitely more terrifying. You are touching my staff. You have 3 seconds to remove your hand or I will remove it for you. The man looked into Adrian's eyes and saw something there that sobered him instantly. He released Lena as if she were burning hot. Adrian did not look at the man again. He looked at the 2 large security guards who had materialized out of the gloom. Get him out, Adrian said. He's banned for life. If he comes back within 100 yards of this door, break his legs. The guards moved efficiently, hauling the protesting man out of his chair and dragging him toward the exit. The club fell into a hushed silence for a heartbeat before the music swelled again, covering the incident. Lena stood frozen, clutching her empty tray to her chest like a shield. Her wrist throbbed where the man had grabbed her. Adrian turned to her. The lethal coldness vanished from his face, replaced by a sharp, focused intensity. Come with me, he said. He did not wait for an answer. He led her through the kitchen, past the staring cooks, and into the sanctuary of his office. He closed the door, shutting out the noise of the club. Sit, he commanded, pointing to the leather sofa. Lena sat. Her knees were shaking. The adrenaline was crashing, leaving her feeling hollow and brittle. Adrian went to a small cabinet and poured a glass of water. He walked over and held it out to her. Drink. Lena took the glass. Her hand trembled so much the water sloshed over the rim. Adrian watched her for a second, then reached out. He placed his hand on her shoulder. It was a heavy, warm weight. Lena stiffened instinctively, her muscles locking up. A man's touch usually meant a demand, but Adrian did not push, he did not pull. He just let his hand rest there, a solid anchor in her spinning world. I am sorry that happened, he said. His voice was rougher than usual. That should not have happened under my roof. I am fine, Lena whispered. She took a sip of water, forcing herself to swallow past the lump in her throat. It was just a drunk. It happens. Not here, Adrian said firmly. Not to you. Lena looked up at him. He was standing close, looming over her, but she did not feel small. She felt shielded. The realization terrified her more than the drunk man had. She relaxed her shoulder, just a fraction, leaning almost imperceptibly into his warmth. "Thank you," she said softly. Adrian's thumb brushed against the fabric of her dress, a tiny, almost subconscious caress near her collarbone. "You do not need to thank me for doing my job, Lena." He pulled his hand away, the loss of contact leaving a cold spot on her skin. He walked back to his desk, putting distance between them as if he too had realized the danger of the moment. "Take 20 minutes, he said, his back to her. "Then get back to work, or go home. It is your choice." "I will work," Lena said, standing up. Her legs felt steadier. "I need the hours." Adrian turned and looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Of course you do." A few nights later, the dynamic shifted again. Lena was carrying a crate of lemons from the storage room when she took a shortcut through the back administrative hallway. She rounded the corner and froze. Adrian was standing by the rear exit, talking to Marco Vitale. Marco looked agitated, his hands moving in sharp, angry gestures. "The Vescari crew is pushing on the south docks. Adrian," Marco hissed, "if we do not push back, we look weak. We need to send a team tonight to—" Adrian saw Lena. He stopped Marco mid-sentence with a sharp, cutting motion of his hand. Marco snapped his mouth shut, turning to glare at Lena. Lena's heart jumped into her throat. She hugged the crate of lemons against her chest. "I am sorry," she stammered. The bar needs lemons." Marco looked like he wanted to yell, but Adrian stepped forward, effectively blocking Marco from Lena's view. Adrian looked tired. There were lines of tension around his eyes that she had not noticed before, and his tie was loosened slightly, a rare sign of disarray. He looked at the heavy crate in her arms, then at the dark circles under her eyes. "Put that down," he said. "Sir, put the crate down, Lena. Marcus can get it." Lena set the crate on the floor. Adrian checked his watch. It was 1 a.m. "You look like you are about to collapse," he said. His voice lacked the hard edge he had used with Marco. It was quiet, almost gentle. "I am fine," Lena lied automatically. "You are not," he countered. "You are swaying on your feet. Clock out. Go home to your son. I will pay you for the full shift." Lena hesitated. "I cannot take money I did not earn." Adrian took a step closer, lowering his voice so Marco could not hear. "Take the win. Lena, go home and get some sleep. That is an order." He waited until she turned and walked away before he turned back to Marco, his voice dropping back into the register of command and violence. Lena hurried down the hall, her heart aching with a confusing mix of gratitude and fear. He was a criminal planning a turf war. She knew that. But he was also the man who noticed she was tired when no one else did. The pull became harder to resist. Adrian started spending more time at the main bar during the slow hours. He would sit at the far end, nursing a club soda, reviewing paperwork, but he would pause when Lena came near to wipe the counter. He asked questions. Not the predatory questions men usually asked. He asked about real things. "Does Jamie like the new school?" He asked one Tuesday. "He does," Lena answered, surprised he remembered her son's name. "The art program is better. He likes to draw." "What does he draw?" "Buildings, mostly. Skyscrapers, bridges. He likes how things are put together." Adrian smiled then, a genuine, small thing that transformed his face. "An architect," he mused. "That is a good dream. Better than destroying things." He looked at his hands then, and Lena felt a sudden, sharp pang of empathy. She realized he was talking about himself. "I tell him he can build whatever he wants," Lena said softly, polishing a glass she had already polished twice. "As long as the foundation is strong." Adrian looked up, capturing her gaze. "Foundations are everything, Lena. Without them, even the prettiest towers fall." The conversation lingered in the air between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. The tension finally snapped, or rather, stretched to its breaking point on a rainy Saturday night. The club had closed, the staff had left, leaving only the cleaning crew in the back and the security team at the front door. Lena was finishing up the inventory, her feet aching. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door, but Adrian's voice stopped her. "Lena." She turned. He was sitting at the bar, a plate of food in front of him, some sort of roasted chicken and vegetables the chef had left. There was a second plate next to it. "Sit," he said. "I really should get back to the babysitter," Lena said, clutching her purse strap. "I already called a car service for you. It will be here in 20 minutes. That is enough time to eat. You have been running for 8 hours and you have not had a bite." It was not a question. It was a statement of fact. Lena's stomach betrayed her with a loud growl. Adrian's eyes crinkled at the corners. "Please," he added. "I hate eating alone." Lena hesitated, then walked over. She started to pull out a stool 2 seats away from him, leaving a safe buffer zone. Adrian watched her, his fork pausing halfway to his mouth. He gestured to the stool directly next to him. "Sit closer," he said, his voice dropping to a velvety rumble. "I don't bite." Lena felt the heat rush up her neck, flooding her cheeks. It was a teasing comment, but his eyes were dark and serious. She paused, her heart hammering against her ribs. She moved to the seat next to him and sat down. He slid the plate toward her. "Eat." They ate in silence for a few minutes, the only sound the clinking of silverware and the rain drumming against the roof. But the silence was thick, electric. Lena was acutely aware of his body next to hers. His arm was inches from hers on the bar top. When he shifted his weight, his knee brushed against hers. She froze, and he did not pull away. The contact burned through her jeans. It was such a small thing, a touch of denim on denim, but it sent a jolt of awareness straight to her core. She turned to look at him. He was already looking at her. Up close, she saw things she had missed from a distance. She saw the faint, jagged white line of a scar running along his jawline, disappearing into his collar. She saw the flecks of gold in his steel gray eyes. She saw the way his gaze dropped to her mouth, just for a fraction of a second before returning to her eyes. "You are nervous," Adrian murmured. "I am always nervous," Lena confessed, her voice barely a whisper. "You do not have to be nervous with me." Lena bit her lower lip, a nervous habit she had never been able to break. Adrian's eyes tracked the movement, his gaze darkened, focusing on her teeth sinking into the soft flesh of her lip. The air between them crackled, heavy and wanting. He reached out, his hand moving slowly, giving her every chance to run. He placed his hand on the back of her chair, leaning in slightly. His scent, rain, cedar, and danger enveloped her. "You have a tell." "Lena," he whispered, "you bite your lip when you are trying to hide what you are thinking." "What am I thinking?" she breathed, unable to look away. Adrian leaned closer. His face was inches from hers. She could feel the warmth radiating from him. "You are thinking that this is a bad idea," he said softly. "And you are right. Then why aren't you stopping?" "Because I am a selfish man," Adrian replied, "and I have wanted to be this close to you since the moment you walked into my office." Lena's breath hitched. For a wild, reckless moment, she wanted him to close the gap. She wanted to lean across that inch of space and find out what a man like Adrian Cole tasted like. But the sound of the front door opening broke the spell. One of the security guards poked his head in. "Car is here for Miss Ward, boss." Adrian pulled back, the mask of the Mafia Don sliding back into place instantly, but his eyes remained hot. "Go," he said gruffly, "before I change my mind and keep you here." Lena grabbed her purse and fled. She did not look back. Later, in the safety of her tiny apartment. Lena lay awake. The rain tapped against the window, mimicking the erratic rhythm of her heart. She touched her knee where his had brushed against it. She touched her lip where his eyes had lingered. She was falling. She knew it. She was falling for the monster in the high tower. She looked at Jamie's sleeping form across the room, guilt twisting in her gut. "He is dangerous," she whispered to herself. "He hurts people. He controls things. He's everything you ran away from." But when she closed her eyes, all she could feel was the phantom weight of his hand on her chair and the terrifying, wonderful safety of being near him. She was playing with fire, and God help her, she wanted to burn. The air in Bellevue had changed. It was no longer just heavy with the humidity of late summer. It was thick with a static charge that made the hair on the back of Lena Ward's neck stand up. At Club Ember, the shadows seemed deeper. The laughter of the patrons felt more brittle, and the security staff moved with a sharper, more aggressive edge. Lena caught snippets of conversation as she moved through the floor collecting empty glasses. The name Vescari was whispered like a curse. "They say the Vescari crew is moving on the waterfront," a bartender muttered to a server. "I heard they hit a warehouse on 4th Street. The server whispered back, eyes wide. Lena did not know who the Vescari crew was, but she knew what the fear looked like on the faces of men who were usually fearless. It looked like a coming storm, but the storm that hit Lena first did not come from the criminal underworld. It came in a sleek, cream-colored envelope taped to the front door of her apartment building. It was a notice of intent to sell. The Riverside Heights complex, a crumbling brick monstrosity that had been Lena's only sanctuary, was being targeted for acquisition by Blake Development Group. The flyer attached to the notice showed a gleaming artist's rendering of glass towers and luxury condos where her home currently stood. The slogan beneath the picture read, "Revitalizing Bellevue for a Brighter Tomorrow." Lena stood in the hallway, clutching the paper, her stomach dropping to her shoes. A brighter tomorrow for Harrison Blake, the developer whose face was plastered on billboards across the city. For Lena, it meant homelessness. It meant losing the school district Jamie loved. It meant the fragile ecosystem she had built was about to be bulldozed. Panic, cold and sharp, took root in her chest. She went to her second job at the diner that afternoon in a daze, dropping a plate of toast and forgetting 3 orders. By the time she arrived at Club Ember that night, she felt as though she were vibrating with anxiety. She tried to hide it. She put on her black dress, applied her lipstick, and pinned her smile in place. But Adrian Cole saw everything. It was a slow Tuesday. Adrian was in his usual booth, reviewing a stack of documents, when Lena brought him his sparkling water. He did not look at the glass. He looked at her hands, which were trembling slightly as she set the coaster down. "Sit," he said. "I have tables." "Adrian," she said, her voice tight. "The floor is empty. Lena, sit." She sat on the edge of the plush leather seat, keeping a respectable distance. Adrian closed his folder and turned his full attention to her. "Who is bothering you?" he asked. The question was quiet, but the threat behind it was unmistakable. "It is not a who," Lena said, rubbing her temples. "It is a what?" "Tell me," Lena sighed. "The fight draining out of her. My building. The landlord says he is selling to a developer. Harrison Blake. They are going to tear it down and build condos that cost more a month than I make in a year." Adrian's expression did not change, but his eyes went cold. The temperature around him seemed to drop. "Harrison Blake," he repeated. The name sounded like gravel in his throat. "You know him?" "I know of him," Adrian said. "He's a parasite in an expensive suit. He buys up low-income neighborhoods, forces the tenants out with intimidation and legal loopholes, and then builds monuments to his own ego. He says we have 3 months, Lena said, her voice cracking. "I do not know where we will go. The rents in the city have doubled. I finally got ahead. Adrian, I finally got a little breathing room. And now the floor is falling out." Adrian leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table. "You do not have to worry about this. Lena, I do have to worry." "I have a son. I mean, you do not have to handle it," he corrected. "I can make a phone call. Harrison Blake has skeletons in his closet that he would prefer to keep buried. Or I can send Marco to have a conversation with him. Blake is a coward. He will back off if the pressure is applied correctly." Lena stared at him. She knew exactly what a conversation with Marco meant. It meant violence. It meant intimidation. It meant dragging her problems into the dark world she was trying so desperately to avoid. "No," she said firmly. Adrian blinked, surprised by her refusal. "No? I do not want you to fix this your way," Lena said. "I do not want people threatened or hurt because of my rent. I am trying to raise Jamie to be a good man. Adrian, how can I do that if I use muscle to solve my problems?" Adrian's jaw tightened. He looked frustrated, like a man offering a drowning woman a life raft only to have her complain about the color. "This is not about morality. Lena, it is about survival." Men like Blake do not play by the rules. If you try to fight him with petitions and tenant meetings, he will crush you. He will use the law as a weapon. I am offering you a shield that is dipped in blood, Lena shot back, keeping her voice low so the bartender would not hear. I cannot do that. Adrian, I cannot owe you that. Adrian sat back, his eyes narrowing slightly. You think you would owe me? You think I keep a ledger of favors for you, do you not? Lena asked. That is how your world works, isn't it? A favor for a favor, a life for a life. Adrian looked away, staring out at the empty dance floor. His profile was sharp, cutting against the dim light. My world is not the only one that works that way. Lena, but fine, have it your way. Fight him with your paperwork and your principles. But when they lock the doors on you, do not say I did not offer you the key. I won't, Lena whispered. The tension between them lingered for days. It was a wall of silence, built from her stubbornness and his bruised pride. Then, 3 nights later, the bell above the door of the diner chimed at 7 in the evening. The diner was a world away from Club Ember. It smelled of bacon grease and sanitizer. The lights were harsh fluorescents that hummed. The customers were truck drivers, exhausted nurses, and students nursing single cups of coffee for hours. When Adrian walked in, the atmosphere shifted instantly. He was wearing a navy suit that looked like it had been tailored in Milan. He wore no tie. His white shirt unbuttoned at the collar. He looked like a panther stalking through a petting zoo. The chatter in the diner died down. Heads turned. The line cook peeked out from the kitchen. Lena was behind the counter, filling a sugar shaker. She nearly dropped it when she saw him. He walked straight to the counter and sat on a spinning vinyl stool that was cracked down the middle. He looked entirely out of place. A diamond in a bucket of gravel. Coffee? Black? He said. Lena stared at him, her heart hammering. What are you doing here, Adrian? I am hungry, he said simply. And I hear the cherry pie is acceptable. Lena poured the coffee. Her hand shook, the dark liquid sloshing slightly. You are going to scare the customers. Adrian glanced around. 2 waitresses were huddled by the pie case, giggling and staring at him with wide, love-struck eyes. An old man in a booth gave him a respectful nod. They seem fine, Adrian said. He drank his coffee. He ate a slice of pie. He did not talk about business. He did not talk about the argument. He asked her how the morning shift was different from the night shift. He asked about the regulars. When he finished, he placed a $100 bill on the counter. Keep the change, he said, and put everyone's meal on my tab. The whole restaurant. Adrian, Lena started to protest. He stood up, leaning over the counter. For a moment, in the harsh, unforgiving light of the diner, he looked younger, less like a kingpin and more like a man trying to impress a girl. I am not breaking anyone's legs. Lena, he said softly, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. I am just buying dinner. Is that allowed in your moral code? Lena felt a flush rise up her neck. Yes, she whispered. That is allowed. He left as quietly as he had arrived, leaving a wake of stunned silence and swooning waitresses behind him. Lena watched him go, feeling a confusing mix of embarrassment and warmth. He had stepped into her mundane, gritty reality and had not looked down on it. He had just wanted to see her. The warmth, however, was short-lived. 2 days later, disaster struck in the stairwell of her building. The elevator was broken again, another tactic by the management to frustrate tenants into leaving. Jamie, full of 7-year-old energy, decided to race Lena up the 3 flights of stairs. He was laughing, his backpack bouncing against his shoulders. Then, halfway up the 2nd flight, the laughter turned into a wheeze. He stopped, gripping the railing, his small chest heaving. Mom, he gasped. Can't breathe. Lena dropped her grocery bags. Eggs cracked on the concrete. Milk splattered. She did not care. She scrambled up the steps, her heart stopping. Jamie, where is your inhaler? In bag, he choked out. Lena tore open his backpack, dumping books and pencils onto the dirty steps. She found the inhaler and shook it frantically. She pressed it to his lips. Breathe, baby. Big breath. He took a puff, then another. The terrifying wheezing sound slowly began to ease, his chest loosening. Lena sat on the step, pulling him into her lap, rocking him back and forth as her own adrenaline crashed. "I am okay, Mom," Jamie whispered, his face pale. "We need to get you a new nebulizer," Lena said, burying her face in his hair. "The old one is barely working." But she knew she could not afford it. Not with the rent hike, not with the threat of moving. That evening, Lena was preparing for her shift at the club, her hands still trembling from the scare. There was a knock at her door. She opened it, expecting the landlord or a neighbor. Instead, a courier stood there holding a sleek white box. "Package for Lena Ward," he said. Lena signed for it. Confused, she brought the box inside and opened it on her kitchen table. Inside was a portable, hospital-grade nebulizer. It was the kind that cost hundreds of dollars, quiet, efficient, and top of the line. There was a supply of medication cartridges tucked neatly beside it. There was no card, no note, but she knew. She sank into a chair, covering her mouth with her hand. Tears pricked her eyes. Adrian. He must have remembered her mentioning Jamie's asthma weeks ago. He must have made a call to one of his doctors. It was invasive. He had found out where she lived. He had intervened in her life without asking. By all rights, she should be furious. But as she looked at the machine that would help her son breathe, she did not feel furious. She felt seen. She felt cared for in a way she had not experienced in years. He had not tried to solve her housing problem with violence. He had solved her fear with medicine. When she arrived at the club that night, she found him in the back hallway. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Adrian stopped, turning to look at her. He did not pretend not to know what she was talking about. "Is he okay?" he asked. "He's fine. The machine. It is incredible. I will pay you back. Do not insult me. Lena, it is too much. Adrian, it is a medical device for a child, not a diamond necklace," he said gruffly. "Just make sure he uses it." He started to walk away, but Lena reached out, her fingers brushing the sleeve of his suit jacket. "Adrian." He froze at her touch, looking down at her hand on his arm. "Thank you," she repeated softly. He looked at her, his steel eyes softening into something resembling longing. "You are welcome, Lena." The night ended with a torrential downpour. The rain hammered against the pavement, turning the streets of Bellevue into slick, black rivers reflecting the neon signs. Lena stood by the staff exit, dreading the walk to the bus stop. She had no umbrella. A black sedan pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down. "Get in," Adrian said. "I can take the bus," Lena said automatically. "Lena, it is pouring. Get in the car." She hesitated for 1 second, then opened the door and slid into the passenger seat. The interior of the car was warm and smelled of leather and him. The rain was muffled instantly, reduced to a soft drumming on the roof. Adrian drove. He did not ask for directions. He already knew where she lived. The realization should have been creepy, but tonight, nestled in the warmth of his car, it just felt inevitable. They drove through the city in silence. It was an intimate silence. The dashboard lights cast a soft, blue glow over his hands on the steering wheel. Lena watched his fingers, long, capable, dangerous fingers that had signed death warrants and bought nebulizers. She rested her hand on the center console. A moment later, Adrian shifted his right hand from the wheel, resting it on the console as well. Their fingers were inches apart. The air in the car grew heavy. Lena could feel the heat radiating from his hand. She wanted to reach out. She wanted to thread her fingers through his. The urge was a physical ache in her chest. She looked at him. He was watching the road, but his jaw was tight, a muscle feathering in his cheek. He knew. He felt it too. He drove slowly, prolonging the ride. The city blurred past, streaks of red and gold. For 20 minutes, they were not a waitress and a mob boss. They were just a man and a woman in a car, shielded from the storm. When they pulled up to the curb of Riverside Heights, the reality of her crumbling building crashed back in. The peeling paint looked even sadder in the rain. Adrian put the car in park but did not unlock the doors immediately. He turned to her. "We are here," he said. "Thank you for the ride," Lena said. Her voice sounded breathless to her own ears. "I will walk you to the door." "You do not have to. I will walk you to the door." He grabbed an umbrella from the back seat and got out. By the time Lena opened her door, he was there, the large black umbrella already expanded, shielding her. They walked up the cracked path to the building's entrance. The rain was a curtain around them, isolating them from the rest of the world. At the door, they stopped. They were standing close, too close. Lena could see the flecks of rainwater on his lapel. She could see the dark lashes framing his eyes. Adrian looked down at her. His gaze dropped to her mouth, then back up to her eyes. He shifted the umbrella slightly, creating a private canopy. "Lena," he murmured. She tilted her head up. Her heart was beating so hard she thought he must be able to hear it. "Sit closer. I don't bite." The memory of his words from weeks ago echoed in her mind. He leaned in, slowly, giving her time to pull away. Lena did not pull away. She rose onto her toes, her breath hitching. His face was inches from hers. She could feel his breath on her cheek. His eyes were searching hers, asking a question she was terrified to answer. The moment stretched, suspended in time. The rain, the dark, the warmth of his body. It would be so easy to close the gap, to let him kiss her, to let him take the weight of the world off her shoulders. But then the front door of the building creaked open. Mrs. Higgins, her elderly neighbor, peered out, holding a garbage bag. "Oh, Lena, you scared me, dear." The spell shattered. Adrian pulled back instantly, his face smoothing into a mask of politeness. Lena stumbled back a step, her cheeks burning. "Hi, Mrs. Higgins," Lena stammered. Just getting home." Adrian held the door open for Mrs. Higgins, nodding respectfully as she shuffled past to the dumpster. Then he looked back at Lena. The moment was gone, but the energy remained, buzzing in the air between them. "Good night." "Lena," he said. His voice was rough. "Good night, Adrian." She slipped inside the building and leaned against the closed door, closing her eyes and pressing her hand to her chest. Her heart was galloping. She walked up the stairs, her legs feeling like jelly. When she entered the apartment, the babysitter was asleep on the couch and Jamie was awake, drawing at the kitchen table. He looked up as she entered. "Who was that?" he asked, a mischievous grin on his face. "Who was who?" Lena asked, hanging up her coat. "The guy with the nice car. I saw you from the window." Lena flushed, turning away to pour a glass of water so he would not see her face. "He is just my boss, Jamie. Gave me a ride because of the rain." Jamie went back to his drawing, shrugging. "When he stands close for a boss." Lena gripped the glass. Jamie saw too much. Something real was growing. She could not deny it anymore. It was terrifying, reckless, and completely undeniable. Outside, in the dark interior of the sedan, Adrian watched Lena's window until the light flickered. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out. It was Marco. "Boss, we got confirmation it is bad. Tell me," Adrian said, his voice cold again. "Harrison Blake, he's not just buying buildings. He's partnering with the Viscari crew. They are using his development deals to launder their money and push us out of the Riverside territory. The eviction notices? That is Viscari making room for their new distribution hub." Adrian stared at the lit window on the third floor. Harrison Blake and the Viscari crew were working together. They were coming for his city. And they were coming for Lena's home. A cold, deadly calm settled over him. Before, protecting Lena had been a personal desire, a weakness he tried to ignore. Now, it was a strategic necessity. "Tell the boys to get ready." "Marco," Adrian said into the phone, his eyes never leaving Lena's window. "We are going to war." The war for Riverside Heights was not being fought with guns, at least not yet. It was being fought with paper. For 2 weeks, the residents of Lena Ward's building had been buried under an avalanche of notices. There were citations for noise violations that had never happened. There were sudden, aggressive health inspections that found faults in plumbing that had worked perfectly for decades. And then there were the letters from the Blake Development Group, offering pitifully low buyout sums that came with a threatening subtext: leave now with a little, or leave later with nothing. Lena sat at the head of a folding table in the basement of the local community center. The air smelled of stale coffee and damp wool. Around her, 20 of her neighbors sat in folding chairs, their faces etched with worry. Mrs. Higgins was wringing a handkerchief in her hands. Mr. Henderson, the landlord, looked pale and sweaty, clearly under pressure from the developers to sell the building out from under them. "We cannot let them bully us," Lena said, her voice steady despite the knot of anxiety in her stomach. She stood up, placing her hands flat on the table. "If we sign those voluntary eviction agreements, we lose our rights. Harrison Blake is counting on us being too scared to read the fine print, but they cut the water off for 6 hours yesterday." "Lena, Mrs." Higgins cried out. "They said it was a maintenance emergency. I cannot carry buckets up 3 flights of stairs at my age. It is harassment," Lena said firmly. "It is illegal, and we need to document every single incident. Every time the water goes out, every time a strange inspector shows up without 24 hours of notice, we build a case. A case requires a lawyer." A deep voice rumbled from the back of the room. "And lawyers cost money we do not have." The door to the community center opened, and the room fell silent. A woman walked in. She was sharp, polished, and entirely out of place in the dusty basement. She wore a cream-colored suit that likely cost more than the collective monthly rent of the entire room. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, professional bun, and she carried a leather briefcase. "Good evening," the woman said, her voice crisp and confident. "My name is Celia Grant. I am an attorney specializing in tenant rights and property litigation." Lena frowned. "We did not call a lawyer," Lena said cautiously. "I am aware," Celia replied, walking to the front of the room. "I represent a private nonprofit legal aid fund that focuses on preserving historical neighborhoods in Bellevue. We have been monitoring Harrison Blake's activities. We believe his tactics in Riverside Heights are predatory and unlawful." She placed her briefcase on the table and clicked it open. "I am here to offer my services pro bono. That means free of charge. If you agree to let me represent you, I can file an immediate injunction against the Blake Development Group to halt all inspections and threats while we review the validity of the sale." A murmur of hope rippled through the room. "Mrs." Higgins looked like she might cry with relief. Lena, however, felt a prickle of suspicion. She watched Celia Grant distribute business cards with efficient precision. The cardstock was heavy, expensive. This was not the look of an overworked, underfunded legal aid lawyer. This was the look of a high-powered corporate shark. Lena stepped closer to Celia while the neighbors chattered excitedly. "Miss Grant," Lena said quietly, "who exactly funds this nonprofit?" Celia looked at Lena. Her expression was unreadable, but there was a glimmer of recognition in her eyes. "Concerned citizens who value the integrity of this city." "Miss Ward, does one of those citizens happen to own a nightclub?" Lena asked, her voice dropping to a whisper. Celia did not blink. She did not smile. She simply snapped her briefcase shut. "My client prefers to remain anonymous, Miss Ward. But I can assure you, his resources are significant, and his dislike for Harrison Blake is very real. I suggest you take the help. You are going to need it." Lena looked at the card in her hand. Adrian, he had sent his own lawyer. He had ignored her request to stay out of it, but he had done it in a way that kept his name off the paper. He was fighting her battle from the shadows. She felt a complicated mix of gratitude and frustration. He was saving them, yes, but he was also weaving himself deeper into the fabric of her life, making it harder and harder to untangle herself from him. "I will take the help," Lena whispered, "but tell your client I know." Celia gave a microscopic nod. "I will convey the message." 2 nights later, the tension that had been simmering in the courtroom papers spilled out onto the asphalt. It was 3 a.m. when Lena clocked out at Club Ember. The night had been exhausting, the club packed with a rowdy weekend crowd. Her feet ached, and her mind was foggy with fatigue. She exited through the rear staff door, stepping into the cool, damp night air. The alleyway was dimly lit, the single sodium bulb flickering overhead. Usually, the security staff kept a close watch on the perimeter, but tonight, the alley seemed unusually empty. Lena adjusted her purse on her shoulder and started walking toward the employee parking lot, where she sometimes caught a ride with one of the bartenders, or walked the 2 blocks to the night bus stop. She heard footsteps behind her, heavy, deliberate. Lena quickened her pace, her hand instinctively going to the pepper spray on her keychain. The footsteps sped up, matching her rhythm. Miss Ward. The voice was rough, unfamiliar. Lena stopped and turned around. 2 men stood about 10 feet away. They were not club patrons. They wore leather jackets that looked expensive but worn, and they had the hard, dead-eyed look of men who hurt people for a living. They were not Adrian's men. Lena knew the look of Adrian's security. Disciplined, stoic. These men looked hungry. "Who are you?" Lena asked, backing up slowly. "We are friends of friends," the taller one said, grinning. He had a silver tooth that glinted in the harsh light. "We wanted to give a message to your boss, but he is hard to get to, so we thought maybe his favorite waitress could deliver it for us. I am just a bartender," Lena said, her voice trembling slightly. "I do not take messages." "Oh, I think you will take this one," the second man said, stepping to the side to cut off her path to the street. "The Viscari family sends their regards. They want you to tell Adrian Cole that he needs to sign the transfer papers for the dockside warehouses. If he stalls again, accidents might start happening." "I don't know what you are talking about," Lena said, her back hitting the brick wall of the adjacent building. The taller man stepped closer, invading her personal space. He smelled of stale tobacco and mint. "You tell him to sign, because it would be a shame if something happened to that little apartment of yours in Riverside Heights, or that kid. What is his name?" "Jamie." The mention of her son turned Lena's fear into ice-cold terror. "Don't you talk about my son," she hissed, clutching her keys so hard the metal bit into her palm. "We know where he goes to school," the man whispered, leaning down. "We know what time the bus drops him off." "You tell Adrian—" The man never finished his sentence. A shadow detached itself from the darkness near the club's rear exit. It moved with terrifying speed. Before the thug could react, a hand clamped onto the back of his collar and yanked him backward with violent force. The man flew off his feet, slamming hard into the dumpster with a sickening metallic clang. Adrian Cole stood there. He was not wearing a suit jacket. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle and tension. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. Behind him, Marco Vitali stepped out, holding a heavy flashlight, blocking the second man's escape. The man Adrian had thrown scrambled to get up, reaching for his waistband, but Adrian was on him instantly. He kicked the man's hand away and shoved him back against the dumpster, pinning him there with a forearm against his throat. "Who sent you?" Adrian snarled. His voice was not the smooth, velvety baritone Lena was used to. It was a low, guttural growl. The man choked, clawing at Adrian's arm. "Viscari! Viscari sent us!" Adrian leaned in, his face inches from the thug's terrified eyes. "You go back to Viscari. You tell him that if he ever sends anyone near this woman or her family again, I will not send a lawyer. I will burn his entire operation to the ground with him inside it. Do you understand me?" "Yes," the man wheezed. "Yes." Adrian released him, shoving him toward the alley mouth. "Run!" The 2 men did not need to be told twice. They scrambled away, stumbling over each other in their haste to escape the predator in the alley. Adrian watched them go, his chest heaving. He stood there for a long moment, his hands clenched into fists at his sides, breathing hard. Lena stood pressed against the brick wall, her entire body shaking. The adrenaline that had held her upright was crashing, leaving her knees weak. Adrian turned. The moment he saw her face, pale, eyes wide with shock, the rage vanished from his expression, replaced by a frantic concern. "Lena." He crossed the distance between them in 2 strides. "Are you hurt? Did they touch you?" he demanded, his hands hovering near her but not touching, as if he was afraid his own anger might burn her. They knew about Jamie," Lena whispered, her voice breaking. "They knew where he goes to school." Adrian let out a sharp breath, a sound of pure pain. "I am sorry," he rasped. "I am so sorry." Lena's composure shattered. A sob ripped through her chest, and her legs gave out. Adrian caught her. He pulled her into him, wrapping his arms around her in a crushingly tight embrace. Lena did not fight it. She buried her face in his shirt, clutching the fabric at his waist, weeping into his chest. He held her up, his body a solid wall between her and the world. One of his hands cradled the back of her head, pressing her closer, while the other rubbed firm, soothing circles on her back. "I've got you," he murmured into her hair. "I've got you. They are gone. You are safe." They stood there in the dirty alley for a long time, until Lena's sobs turned into ragged breaths. "Come inside," Adrian said gently. He guided her back through the staff door, past the confused security team, and straight up the private stairwell to his office. Inside, he locked the door. The room was quiet, dim, and safe. Adrian sat Lena on the leather couch. He went to the wet bar and poured a glass of water, his hands moving with a slight tremor that betrayed his own adrenaline. He brought it to her. "Drink." Lena took the glass with both hands to keep it steady. She took a sip, the cold water grounding her. Adrian sat down next to her, not across the desk, but right there on the couch. He was close enough that their thighs brushed. He watched her, his eyes dark with guilt. "I never wanted this to touch you," he said quietly. "I thought I could keep the worlds separate. There are no separate worlds." "Adrian," Lena said, her voice hoarse, "it is all the same city?" Adrian looked down at his hands, the hands that had just thrown a man against a dumpster to protect her. "I should fire you," he said. "I should send you away where they cannot associate you with me. Is that what you want?" Lena asked, turning to look at him. Adrian looked up, his gaze locked with hers. The intensity in his eyes took her breath away. "No, that is the last thing I want." He reached out and took her hands. His grip was warm, calloused, and desperate. He intertwined his fingers with hers, holding on as if she were the only anchor in a storm. Lena looked at their joined hands. She knew she should pull away. She knew that every second she stayed on this couch, holding this man's hand, she was stepping further into the fire. But the way he had looked in the alley, like he would tear the world apart for her, had cracked something open in her chest. She did not pull away. Instead, she squeezed his hand back. Adrian let out a shaky breath. He leaned in slowly, his eyes searching hers for permission. "Lena," he whispered. She did not retreat. She tilted her chin up, her heart racing so fast she felt dizzy. He closed the distance. His lips brushed hers, tentative at first, a question asked in the dark. It was soft, shockingly gentle for a man capable of such violence. Lena made a small sound in the back of her throat and leaned into him. The kiss deepened. It was not frantic or aggressive. It was a slow, pouring out of months of pent-up tension, fear, and longing. Adrian released her hands and brought one hand up to cup her cheek, his thumb stroking her skin with reverence. Lena's hands moved up to rest on his chest, feeling the heavy, rapid thud of his heart beneath the crisp white shirt. He tasted of scotch and mint. He felt like safety. They shifted closer, bodies pressing together on the couch. The kiss grew more passionate, breaths mingling. The silence of the room filled with the sound of their need for each other. For a minute, there was no Vascari crew, no eviction notices, no past mistakes. There was just the heat of his skin and the desperate tenderness of his mouth. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathless. Adrian rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. His hand was still on her cheek, holding her as if she might disappear. Lena opened her eyes. The reality of the situation rushed back in, but it was softened now by the undeniable truth of what had just happened. "Adrian," she whispered, I cannot drag Jamie into this. I cannot let him be a target." Adrian opened his eyes. The gray steel was back, but it was not directed at her. It was directed at the threat outside the door. "He won't be," Adrian vowed, his voice low and fierce. "I promise you, Lena, I will not let anyone touch a hair on his head. I will burn the city down before I let them near either of you." He kissed her forehead, a lingering seal on his promise. "I will have Marco drive you home, and I will have a car parked outside your building all night. You will not see them. But they will be there. Lena nodded, pulling back slightly. She missed his warmth immediately. Okay. She stood up. Smoothing her dress, she felt exposed, raw and terrifyingly alive. Adrian stood as well. He walked her to the door, his hand resting on the small of her back. Try to sleep, he said. You too, she replied, though she knew neither of them would sleep well tonight. Lena went home in the back of Marco's car. She climbed the stairs to her apartment and checked on Jamie immediately. He was sleeping soundly, clutching his stuffed bear, oblivious to the fact that his name had been spoken in a dark alley by men with evil intent. Lena sat on the edge of his bed, watching his chest rise and fall. She felt a profound, crushing guilt. She had brought this danger to his doorstep, but beneath the guilt, there was a persistent, glowing ember of longing. She touched her lips. Remembering the feel of Adrian's mouth, she remembered the way he had defended her. She remembered how safe she had felt in his arms. She was in love with a monster, but he was a monster who was trying to be a guardian angel, and that made everything complicated. Back at Club Ember, Adrian did not go home. He poured himself a drink but did not drink it. He stood by the window of his office, looking down at the empty street where the Viscari thugs had run. Harrison Blake thought he could use street thugs to intimidate him. He thought he could use Lena as leverage. Adrian's hand tightened around the glass until it threatened to shatter. They had crossed a line. They had brought the war to the one innocent thing in Adrian's life. He picked up his phone and dialed a number. Marco. He said when the line connected, "Wake the boys up." There was a pause on the other end. "All of them. Boss, all of them," Adrian said, his voice cold and final. "We are done playing defense. Blake and Viscari want a war? We are going to give them one. We are taking the fight to them." He hung up the phone and looked out at the city lights. For Lena, he thought. He would destroy them all to keep her safe, even if it meant burning down the very empire he had spent his life building. The city of Bellevue felt like a kettle left on the stove too long, rattling and spitting as the pressure built to a screaming point. For the past week, the wail of sirens had become the city's nightly soundtrack. The morning news reports were carefully sanitized, using phrases like localized disturbances and structural fires. But the people on the street knew the truth. It was a war. Shadows were moving in the dark. Warehouses near the docks had burned down mysteriously in the middle of the night. Delivery trucks belonging to legitimate businesses fronting for the Viscari crew were found with their tires slashed and engines filled with sugar. In retaliation, the windows of a bakery under coal syndicate protection were smashed in broad daylight. Lena Ward watched it all from the periphery, her stomach churning with a constant, acidic nausea. She saw the tension in the shoulders of the bouncers at Club Ember. She saw the fresh bandages on Marco Vitale's knuckles. And she saw the way Adrian Cole looked when he came into the club, tired, wired, and radiating a cold. Sharp danger that kept everyone at a 10-foot radius. Everyone except her. One Tuesday night, after a particularly ominous report about a shooting in an alleyway just 3 blocks from Riverside Heights, Lena marched to the back office. She did not knock. She pushed the door open. Adrian was standing behind his desk, staring at a large map of the city spread out across the mahogany surface. He looked up, his hand instantly moving toward the drawer where she knew he kept a gun, before he recognized her. His hand relaxed, but his eyes remained hard. "You should knock." "Lena," he said, his voice rough with fatigue. "And you should tell me the truth," Lena countered, closing the door behind her and locking it. "Is this you? The fires, the fights, is this happening because of the Viscari crew coming after me?" Adrian straightened up. Unbuttoning his suit jacket, he looked exhausted. There were dark purple bruises of fatigue under his eyes, and the lines around his mouth were etched deep. "It is not just about you, Lena." "But it is about me, isn't it?" Lena pressed, stepping closer to the desk. "They threatened Jamie and me, and now half the city seems to be on fire. I see the news. Adrian, I hear the staff talking. People are getting hurt." Adrian's expression hardened. He walked around the desk, closing the distance between them. People were always getting hurt. "Lena, you just didn't see it before because it wasn't happening on your doorstep. The Viscari crew has been bleeding this city dry for a decade. They run drugs. They run girls. They squeeze business owners until they snap. And you are different? Lena asked, her voice shaking. You run a syndicate too. I keep order, Adrian said fiercely. I keep the drugs away from the schools. I keep the violence contained to the people who signed up for the game. But Viscari broke the rules. He threatened a civilian. He threatened a child. So you start a war? Lena cried. You burn down warehouses? What if someone was inside? I checked, Adrian said, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. The buildings were empty. I am surgical. Lena, they are butchers. There is a difference. I do not want to be the reason for a war. Adrian, I do not want to be the reason men are bleeding in alleys. You are not the reason, Adrian shouted back, the sudden volume making Lena jump. He stopped, taking a deep breath to steady himself. He reached out, gripping her upper arms gently but firmly, forcing her to look at him. You are not the reason, Lena. You are just the line in the sand. They wanted to take everything. They wanted the docks. They wanted the district. And they thought they could use you to break me. If I let them hurt you, I'm not a boss anymore. I am nothing. Lena looked up at him, seeing the raw conflict in his eyes. He was a violent man trying to justify his nature to a woman who hated violence. But beneath the anger, she saw the terror, the fear of losing her. It is too much. Adrian, she whispered. It is the only way I know how to keep you safe, he replied, his thumbs brushing against the fabric of her sleeves. I cannot change who I am. Lena, I can only choose who I fight for, and I am choosing you. The argument ended in a stalemate, but the air between them had shifted. Lena could no longer pretend she was an innocent bystander. She was the catalyst. 2 days later, the war came to her front door, not with fire, but with bureaucracy. Lena returned from a shift at the diner to find a bright orange sticker plastered to the front door of the Riverside Heights building, condemned. Her heart stopped. She ripped the sticker off, reading the small print. Structural instability, foundation cracks, immediate vacancy required within 7 days. It was a lie. The building was old and run down. Yes, but the foundation was solid stone. This was Harrison Blake. He had pulled strings at the city inspector's office. He was bypassing the courts and using the city's own safety codes to throw 20 families onto the street. Lena ran up the stairs, clutching the paper. She found Mrs. Higgins crying in the hallway, packing a suitcase with shaking hands. They say the roof is going to collapse. Mrs. Higgins sobbed. Where am I going to go? Lena, I have nowhere to go. Lena held the old woman, fury rising in her throat like bile. It was a cold, suffocating rage. She looked at Jamie's door. If they were kicked out in 7 days, they would be in a shelter. Jamie's asthma would flare up. He would lose his school. The system was broken. The law was broken. Harrison Blake had bought the referees. Lena realized then that playing by the rules only worked when the other side played by them, too. She went into her apartment, grabbed her purse, and walked back out. She took a taxi straight to Club Ember. It was the middle of the afternoon, and the club was closed. She banged on the back door until Marco opened it. Where is he? Lena asked. Marco looked at her face, pale, determined, scary in its own right, and stepped aside. Upstairs, Lena marched up to the office. Adrian was on the phone, but he hung up the moment he saw her. Lena, what is wrong? She slammed the orange condemnation notice onto his desk. They are kicking us out. 7 days. They falsified an inspection report. Adrian picked up the paper, reading it quickly. His jaw tightened until a muscle jumped in his cheek. Blake, he muttered. I cannot stop this. Adrian, Lena said, her voice devoid of the hesitation she had held onto for so long. I went to the tenant meetings. I signed the petitions. I spoke to your lawyer, but he bought the city inspector. She took a breath, looking him in the eye. You said you could fix it. You said you could pressure him. Adrian went still. He looked at her carefully. You told me not to involved. You told me you wanted to stay clean. I am not clean, Lena said, her voice cracking. I am drowning. And if I drown, Jamie drowns with me. I do not care about my pride anymore. I care about my home. She leaned her hands on the desk, leaning in. Make him stop. Adrian, please. Adrian stood up slowly. He walked around the desk and took her hand. He did not say, "I told you so." He did not gloat. "Go home, Lena. Pack a bag just in case. But do not leave the apartment. What are you going to do?" "I am going to have a business negotiation." The office of Blake Development Group was on the 40th floor of a glass tower that overlooked the very neighborhoods Harrison Blake was trying to bulldoze. Harrison Blake sat behind a desk made of glass and chrome, smiling that practiced, shark-like smile that looked good on billboards. "Mr. Cole," he said, not standing up. "To what do I owe the pleasure? I usually do not do business with your type." Adrian Cole sat in the chair opposite him. He did not relax. He sat with the coiled stillness of a viper. He was wearing his most expensive suit, looking every inch the legitimate businessman, but the air around him was heavy with menace. "We have a mutual interest, Harrison. Riverside Heights?" Harrison chuckled, tapping a gold pen on the glass desk. "Ah, yes. A tragedy. The inspection report was quite damning. I am doing the city a favor. Really, clearing out a hazard." "You bribed the inspector," Adrian stated calmly. Harrison's smile faltered slightly, then returned. "That is a slanderous accusation, and one you cannot prove. The building is coming down. Mr. Cole, the Vascari family and I have big plans for that land, a distribution center. Very profitable." Adrian leaned forward. "I am not here to discuss profit margins. I am here to give you a choice." "A choice?" Harrison laughed. "You are a thug in a suit. Cole, you have no leverage here. The law is on my side." "The police are in my pocket." Adrian reached into his jacket pocket. Harrison flinched, expecting a weapon. Adrian pulled out a simple manila folder and slid it across the glass. Harrison opened it. His smile vanished instantly. His face drained of color. "Where did you get this?" he whispered. It was a collection of photos and bank statements. Photos of Harrison meeting with known Vascari traffickers. Statements showing money laundering through his construction accounts. And most damningly, proof of an offshore account that Harrison had been hiding from his wife and the IRS. "You think the police are in your pocket?" Adrian asked softly. "Maybe, but the IRS? The FBI? They are harder to buy. And the Vascari crew, they do not like it when their partners skim off the top." Adrian pointed to a highlighted line on a bank statement. "You are stealing from Vascari. Harrison, 10% of every wash. If I send this folder to Vascari, you will not go to jail. You will go missing." Harrison was trembling now. He dropped the folder as if it were burning. "What do you want?" he choked out. "I want the condemnation order rescinded. Today. I want a 10-year freeze on any development in Riverside Heights, and I want you to transfer the ownership of the building to a blind trust that I control. That will cost me millions. Your life is worth more than millions, isn't it?" Adrian stood up, buttoning his jacket. "You have 1 hour. Harrison, make the calls, or I make mine." He walked out of the office without looking back, leaving Harrison Blake sweating through his silk shirt. Adrian did not go back to the club. He drove his car to Riverside Heights. It was dark by the time he arrived. The orange sticker was still on the door, a hateful blemish. He walked up the stairs, his body feeling heavy. The adrenaline of the confrontation was fading, leaving behind a deep, weary hollow in his chest. He knocked on Lena's door. She opened it instantly. She was wearing oversized sweatpants and a t-shirt, her hair in a messy bun. She looked beautiful. "Is it done?" she asked breathlessly. Adrian nodded, leaning against the doorframe. "The inspector made a mistake. He will issue a retraction in the morning. The building is safe. You are safe." Lena let out a sob of relief. Covering her face with her hands, she cried for a moment, just releasing the tension, then looked up at him. She saw the way his shoulders slumped, the way he rubbed his eyes. "You look terrible," she said softly. "It has been a long day." Lena stepped back, opening the door wider. "Jamie is asleep. Come in. Let me make you tea." Adrian hesitated. "I should go. I bring trouble." "Lena, you brought safety today," she said. "Please, just for a minute. Decompress." Adrian walked in. The apartment was small, cramped and smelled of cinnamon and laundry detergent. It was the warmest place he had ever been. 10 minutes later, they were sitting at the small, scratched kitchen table. A single yellow lamp cast a soft glow over them, creating a private world away from the war outside. Lena placed a mug of chamomile tea in front of him. "I do not usually drink tea," Adrian admitted, wrapping his large hands around the warm ceramic. "You need it," Lena said, sitting across from him. Her knee brushed against his under the table. She did not pull away. He did not pull away. They sat in silence for a moment, just breathing. "Why do you do it, Adrian?" Lena asked quietly. "The life, the danger. You are smart enough to be anything. You could have been a CEO, a lawyer." Adrian looked into the dark liquid in his mug. "I grew up 3 blocks from here," he said, "in a building worse than this one. My father was a drunk who worked at the docks until his back gave out. Then he was just a drunk. My mother scrubbed floors until her hands bled. We froze in the winter. We starved in the summer." He looked up at her, his eyes stark. "I watch people with power crush people like us every day. Landlords, cops, gangs. I decided a long time ago that I would never be the one getting crushed again. I would be the one with the power. I would build a wall around the people I cared about so high that no one could ever touch them." Lena listened, her heart aching for the boy he had been. "I understand survival," she whispered. "What about you?" Adrian asked. "Why do you run so hard from help?" "Because I trusted the wrong man once," Lena said, tracing the rim of her mug. "Jamie's father. He was wild, exciting. He promised the world. But when things got hard, he got mean. And then he got dangerous. I realized too late that his power wasn't a shield. It was a cage." She looked at Adrian. "I swore I would never let a man hold the keys to my life again. That is why I fought you. I was afraid that if I let you help me, I would just be stepping into another cage." Adrian reached across the table. He moved slowly, giving her time to retreat. When she didn't, he reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her jawline, his skin rough against her softness. "I do not want to cage you, Lena," he said, his voice a low rumble. "I want to give you the keys. I want to give you the whole damn building." Lena turned her face into his hand, closing her eyes. The gesture was so intimate, so trusting, that it made Adrian's chest tighten. "You are not him," she whispered. "No, I am not." She opened her eyes. They were dark, dilated, reflecting the lamplight. She leaned forward. Adrian leaned forward. They met over the center of the worn table. The kiss was different this time. It wasn't fueled by adrenaline or fear. It was slow, deliberate, a conversation without words. Adrian's hand slid from her jaw to the back of her neck, his fingers tangling in the messy bun, pulling her gently closer. Lena's hands reached out, sliding up his arms, feeling the muscle beneath the expensive fabric of his suit. She traced the line of his shoulders, then moved her hands down to the small of his back, pulling him toward the table edge. Adrian groaned low in his throat, a sound of pure want. He deepened the kiss, his tongue sweeping against hers, tasting the cinnamon and the sweetness of her breath. The air in the kitchen became heavy, thick with a magnetic pull. They were 2 lonely people finding harbor in each other. Adrian's other hand came up to rest on her waist, his thumb rubbing circles against her side through her t-shirt. The heat of his palm seared her skin. It felt right. It felt like coming home. Lena shifted, instinctively wanting to be closer, to climb into his lap and forget the world entirely. But then the floorboards in the hallway creaked. It was a tiny sound, barely audible, but it was enough. Lena pulled back, breathless, her lips swollen and red. "Jamie," she whispered. He might wake up for water." Adrian froze. He took a ragged breath, his eyes still locked on hers, dark with desire. But the steel control slammed back into place. He respected the boundary instantly. He did not push. He did not complain. He rested his forehead against hers, closing his eyes. "Right," he murmured. "Jamie." They stayed like that for a moment, foreheads touching, breathing the same air. Lena's hands were still on his waist. His hand was still in her hair. You should go, Lena whispered, though every cell in her body wanted him to stay. I should. Adrian agreed. He pulled back slowly, reluctantly untangling his fingers from her hair. He stood up, straightening his jacket, though his eyes never left her face. Lock the door behind me. Lena. I always do. He walked to the door, then paused. He looked back at her sitting at the kitchen table, bathed in the yellow light, looking disheveled and thoroughly kissed. Sleep well, Lena. You too. Adrian. He left. Lena locked the deadbolt, the sound echoing in the quiet apartment. She leaned her back against the door, touching her lips. The war outside was still raging. Harrison Blake was still a threat. The Vascari crew was still out for blood. But for the first time in a long time, Lena did not feel alone in the fight. She felt cherished. And as she turned off the kitchen light, she knew that there was no going back. She had invited the wolf into her kitchen, and she had fallen in love with him. And she would fight alongside him to keep this fragile, beautiful thing they were building from burning down. Part 6. The endgame began not with a roar, but with a calculated whisper. Harrison Blake and the Vascari leadership had realized that brute force was not enough to break Adrian Cole. Adrian was too entrenched, too smart, and too willing to burn his own assets to deny them a foothold. So they changed tactics. They stopped attacking his soldiers and started attacking his freedom, a warehouse on the edge of the industrial district, one that ostensibly belonged to a shell company of the Cole Syndicate, exploded in the middle of the night within hours. Anonymous tips flooded the police department, claiming the warehouse was a distribution hub for illegal arms and that Adrian Cole had ordered the arson to destroy evidence. It was a frame-up, crude, but effective. Lena watched the news from her living room floor, her back pressed against the sofa, folding Jamie's laundry. The screen showed grainy footage of flames licking the night sky. The reporter spoke of a violent escalation and imminent warrants. A knock at the door made her jump. It was not the rhythmic, confident knock of Adrian. It was sharp and authoritative. Lena approached the peephole. A woman stood there. She wore a beige trench coat and a badge clipped to her belt. Lena opened the door chain, keeping the gap narrow. "Can I help you?" "Lena Ward?" the woman asked. Her eyes were tired but sharp, scanning Lena's face for weakness. "I am Detective Aaron Hale. I would like to have a conversation with you about your employer." "I have nothing to say," Lena said, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I think you do," Hale said, leaning in slightly. "I know about the eviction notices. I know about the nebulizer. I know he pays your rent. I also know that the Vascari crew has been asking around about your son's school schedule." Lena went cold. She undid the chain and opened the door. "Come in." They sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Adrian had held her face in his hands just nights before. Detective Hale placed a folder on the table. "We've been building a RICO case against Adrian Cole for 5 years, Hale said bluntly. "He's smart. He isolates himself. But this war with Vascari is making him sloppy. We're going to take him down. Lena, it is not a matter of if, but when." "Why are you telling me this?" Lena asked, gripping her hands together in her lap. "Because when he goes down, the protection he provides you vanishes. The Vascari crew will not care that he is in handcuffs. They will still want to send a message." Hale pushed the folder toward her. "Help us. Tell us where he keeps his ledger. Tell us about the meetings he takes in the back office. If you cooperate, we can put you and Jamie in witness protection. We can guarantee that the Riverside Heights development is permanently halted as part of the asset seizure. We can give you a fresh start." Lena stared at the folder. It was a lifeline. It was the logical, safe choice. Betray the man who was a criminal to save her son and her home. But then she remembered the way Adrian had stood in the alley, shaking with rage because someone had threatened her. She remembered the way he had looked at her in the car, terrified of his own feelings. "He is not who you think he is," Lena whispered. "He is a mob boss." "Lena," Hale said softly, "do not confuse a golden cage with safety. I need time to think," Lena said, standing up. "Please, just leave." Hale stood, leaving a business card on the table. "You have 24 hours. After that, The warrant drops, and we cannot guarantee anything." When the door closed, Lena began to pace. The apartment felt too small. She walked from the kitchen to the bedroom, watching Jamie sleep. He looked so peaceful, his chest rising and falling rhythmically, aided by the machine Adrian had bought. She was torn in two. On one side was the law, morality, and a guaranteed future. On the other side was Adrian. He had done terrible things. She knew that, but he had also been the only person in her life who had kept his promises. He had not just thrown money at her problems, he had thrown himself in front of them. "I cannot do it," she whispered to the empty room. "I cannot be the knife in his back." Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Adrian. "Pack a bag. Now. I'm 5 minutes away." Panic spiked in her chest. Had he known she spoke to the police? When she opened the door 5 minutes later, Adrian did not look like a man who suspected betrayal. He looked like a man who was terrified. "We have to go," he said, stepping inside and locking the door behind him. He was wearing a dark jacket, his eyes scanning the apartment as if expecting assassins to burst from the cupboards. "Adrian, what is happening? My source in the Vescari camp just called," Adrian said, his voice tight. "They are not waiting for the police to arrest me. They are planning to grab you and Jamie tonight. They think if they have you, I will sign over the territory to stop the warehouse investigation." Lena felt the blood drain from her face. "Jamie is sleeping," she stammered. I cannot just wake him up and run. This is his home. This is not a home right now. Lena, it is a target." He grabbed her shoulders, his grip desperate. "Please, Lena. Trust me. I have a safe house. It is in the suburbs. It is off the books. No one knows about it except Marco. Just for a few days, until I finish this." Lena looked at him. She saw the fear in his eyes, not for himself, but for her. "Okay," she breathed. "Okay." They woke Jamie gently, telling him they were going on a surprise vacation. Jamie, groggy and confused, clung to his teddy bear as Adrian carried him down to the waiting car. The drive was silent and tense. Marco drove, his eyes constantly checking the rearview mirror. Adrian sat in the back with Lena and Jamie, his body angled to shield them from the window. The safe house was a small, unassuming bungalow in a quiet neighborhood filled with minivans and swing sets. It looked incredibly, painfully normal. Inside, it was clean but sparse. Marco stayed outside to stand guard. Adrian locked the door and turned to Lena. "You are safe here," he said, letting out a long breath. He showed Jamie to a bedroom that had a bunk bed. Once Jamie was settled and asleep again, Lena walked into the small living room. Adrian was sitting on the beige sofa, his head in his hands. He looked stripped raw. The armor of the Mafia Don was gone, leaving only a tired man carrying too much weight. Lena sat down next to him. She pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around her legs. "What happens now?" she asked softly. Adrian lifted his head. He looked around the room, at the generic art on the walls, the television, the quiet street outside the window. "This is what normal looks like," he murmured. "Quiet, boring, safe." "Is that what you want?" Lena asked. Adrian turned to her. He rested his arm along the back of the sofa behind her, not touching her, but encompassing her. "I never thought I did. I thought I wanted the city. I thought I wanted the power. But sitting here, watching you make sure Jamie had his blanket..." He trailed off, his eyes searching hers. "I want this. Lena, I want to be the man who comes home to this. But I do not know if I can be. I have dug a very deep hole. You can climb out," Lena whispered. "It is hard, but you can do it." Adrian shifted, turning his body toward her. The distance between them vanished. He reached out, his hand cupping the back of her neck, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. "If I climb out," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Will you be there at the top?" Lena looked at him, at the scar on his jaw, the gray eyes that had seen too much darkness and were now looking at her like she was the only light in the world. "Yes," she said. "I will be there." Adrian made a sound, halfway between a groan and a sigh, and pulled her to him. He kissed her. It was not like the kiss in the office, which had been full of adrenaline, and it was not like the kiss in the kitchen, which had been tentative. This was a claiming. It was desperate and deep, a pouring out of every fear and hope he held. Lena clung to him, her hands gripping the lapels of his jacket. She pulled him closer, needing to feel the solid reality of him. They shifted until they were lying on the cramped sofa, fully dressed, bodies pressed together from chest to knee. Adrian held her as if she were made of glass. His hands moved over her back, her arms, her hair, not with lust, but with a reverence that made her heart ache. He buried his face in the crook of her neck, breathing her in. "Stay with me," he whispered against her skin. "Just for tonight. Let me pretend this is my life. I am here," Lena whispered back, running her fingers through his hair. "I am right here." They lay there for hours, whispering promises in the dark, talking about things that had nothing to do with crime, about Jamie's drawings, about the ocean, about the kind of coffee Adrian liked. It was a fragile bubble of peace, bought with stolen time. But as Lena drifted off to sleep, safe in his arms, she did not know that Adrian was already saying goodbye. The next morning, Lena woke up alone on the sofa. There was a blanket tucked carefully around her. She sat up, panic rising, but she found a note on the coffee table. "Stay inside. Marco is at the door. I'm going to fix it. All of it." Adrian was not at the club. He was sitting in a diner booth, not Lena's diner, but a roadside stop on the highway. Detective Aaron Hale slid into the seat across from him. "You are a hard man to find, Cole," she said. "I am right here," Adrian replied calmly. He took a sip of his black coffee. "I assume you are not turning yourself in out of the goodness of your heart," Hale said. "I have terms." Adrian said. He slid a thick envelope across the table. Inside this envelope is everything. The location of the Vascari stash houses, the proof of Harrison Blake's money laundering, the names of the corrupt inspectors, and my own ledger. Hale's eyes widened. She opened the envelope, thumbing through the pages. This destroys the entire network, including yours. That is the point," Adrian said. "I am dismantling the Cole Syndicate. Effective immediately." "Why?" Hale asked, looking at him with genuine confusion. "I want guarantees," Adrian said, his voice steely. "Lena Ward and her son are strictly off limits. They get full protection. The Riverside Heights building is transferred to a trust for the tenants, and the development project is killed. And Harrison Blake and the Vascari brothers go to prison for life. And for you?" Hale asked. Adrian looked out the window at the gray sky. "I will plead guilty to the racketeering charges. But the arson? That was Vascari. I want that charge dropped, and I want a reduced sentence in exchange for my cooperation and the dismantling of the organization." Hale considered it. It was the biggest win of her career. She would take down 2 crime families and a corrupt developer in one stroke. 10 years. She said, "With parole in 5 if you behave. Make it 7 out in 4. Adrian countered. "And I want federal placement, somewhere far away from Vascari's reach." "Done," Hale said. Adrian finished his coffee. "The Vascari crew is hitting the South Warehouse at noon. They think I will be there. We will be waiting," Hale said. The warehouse raid was chaos. The Vascari crew rolled up in 3 vans, heavily armed, expecting to find Adrian cornered. Instead, they found a battalion of SWAT officers. Flashbangs detonated, turning the warehouse into a blinding white haze. Gunfire erupted, but it was short-lived. The Vascari men realized they were outgunned and outmaneuvered. They threw down their weapons. From a high vantage point on a catwalk, Adrian watched. He saw the Vascari brothers being cuffed and dragged away. He saw the empire he had fought the rivals for crumbling into dust. He felt lighter than he had in 20 years. Detective Hale walked up the metal stairs, flanked by 2 officers. "It is time." "Adrian," she said. Adrian held out his wrists. He did not look back at the city. He thought of a small bungalow in the suburbs, and a woman sleeping on a beige couch. "Tell her I kept my promise," Adrian said as the cuffs clicked shut. Lena found out from the news. She was still at the safe house when the report flashed across the screen. Massive organized crime bust, Adrian Cole. Surrenders. She dropped her coffee mug. It shattered on the floor. Hot liquid splashing her feet, but she did not feel it. He gave himself up. Marco, who had been standing by the door, lowered his head. He made a deal. Miss Ward, to keep you safe. Lena drove to the courthouse. She demanded to see him, but it was chaos. Lawyers, reporters, police everywhere. Detective Hale found her in the lobby, looking lost and devastated. Lena, Hale said gently. You took him, Lena accused, tears streaming down her face. You said I had 24 hours. He came to me. Lena, he gave us everything, Blake, Vescari, all of it. Why? Lena whispered. To buy you a future, Hale said. He negotiated a plea. He is going away. Lena, but not forever. And because of him, your building is safe. Harrison Blake is in handcuffs. Lena sank onto a bench, burying her face in her hands. He had done it. He had climbed out of the hole, just like she said, but he had pulled the ladder up behind him so she wouldn't be dragged down. 6 months later, the visiting room of the Federal Correctional Facility was stark and white. The tables were bolted to the floor. Lena sat at table 4. She was wearing a new dress, blue like the sky. Jamie sat next to her, swinging his legs, drawing in a sketchbook. The door buzzed open. Adrian walked in. He looked different. He was wearing a beige jumpsuit, not a suit. His hair was a little longer. He looked tired, but the tension that had always defined him, the constant looking over his shoulder, was gone. He sat down across from them. Hi, he said softly. Hi, Jamie said brightly. I drew you a picture. It is a bridge. Adrian smiled. Taking the paper, it is a strong bridge. Jamie. Good foundation. He looked at Lena. His eyes were hungry, drinking in the sight of her. You look good. Lena, he said, and you look... Rested, she replied, her voice thick. I am learning to sleep without a gun under my pillow, Adrian said dryly. It takes some getting used to. They sat in silence for a moment, the air between them charged with everything they could not say in front of the guards. Hale told me about the deal, Lena said, about the building. We are renovating. The trust you set up, it is paying for new plumbing, new windows. That is good, Adrian said. That is good. Lena reached across the table. She ignored the guard's watchful eye. She placed her hand flat on the table, palm up. Adrian hesitated, then placed his hand over hers. His skin was warm, familiar. 4 years, Lena whispered. Hale said you could be out in 4. That is a long time. Lena, you do not have to. I will be there. She interrupted him. Her voice was fierce. I told you I would be there at the top when you climbed out. I meant it. Adrian's fingers tightened around hers. His eyes shone with a raw, naked hope. I am going to work in the library here, he said. I am getting a degree, engineering. Lena smiled through her tears. An architect, just like Jamie. The buzzer sounded. Time was up. Adrian stood up. He squeezed her hand one last time before letting go. Wait for me, he asked, his voice breaking slightly. I am not going anywhere, Lena said. She watched him walk back through the heavy steel doors. He looked back once, just before the door closed, and gave her a small, private nod. 3 years and 8 months later. The courtyard of Riverside Heights was unrecognizable. The cracked pavement was gone, replaced by green grass and a playground. The brick facade of the building had been pointed and cleaned. Lena sat on a bench, watching Jamie, now almost 11, playing soccer with the neighbor kids. The autumn air was crisp. She looked down at the letter in her lap. The handwriting was familiar, sharp and angular. Lena. The parole board approved the release date, Tuesday. I have a job lined up with a construction firm in the city. Entry level. Hard hats and steel-toed boots. It is a long way from the corner office, but it is honest. I still dream about that night at the safe house. It is the only thing that kept me sane in here. The thought of normal. I hope you still have that tea. I'm going to need a cup. Alina folded the letter and pressed it to her heart. She looked up at the sky. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the city. The war was over. The monsters were gone. She remembered the night in the club, the rain, the fear, and the man who had slid a plate of food toward her and told her to sit closer. She smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that reached her eyes. She stood up and called out to her son, "Come on, Jamie, We have to go to the store. We need to buy chamomile tea. Jamie ran over, breathless. Is he coming home? Jamie asked. Yes, Lena said, taking her son's hand. He is coming home. And this time, she knew. When he asked her to sit closer, she wouldn't hesitate. She would be right there, building a life on a foundation that was finally, unshakably strong. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It has been a journey of danger, sacrifice, and love with Lena and Adrian. I hope you enjoyed seeing them fight for their second chance. I would love to hear from you. Please comment below and tell me where you are listening from. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Mafia Romance Stories so you never miss an upload. And please share your thoughts in the comments in English. What was your favorite part? Did you like how Adrian redeemed himself? Thank you for your support, and I will see you in the next story.